Mike Salk. I'm trying to think how many, we've known each other quite a few years, so it is a pleasure to have you on David Anderson Talking Market Data, as I've heard you many times talking market data. So Mike Salk Talking Market Data. It's good to have you on the podcast. As I think we were chatting earlier on, I'm going to put your LinkedIn up here so that people can look at that and get a sense of sort of what your background is, what you're up to now. But give us a little bit of an update. Again, I knew you for many years from Moody's, but you've moved on from that. What are you doing now, Mike?
So David, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. As you said, we've known each other for a number of years, and I was actually trying to
You're wearing
think back,
short trousers when I met you, I'm sure.
That probably was it. I remember sitting in the lobby or standing in the lobby of a hotel in Amsterdam after an FISD event, where you were basically saying I defended myself well in the panel I was on, or there was some conversation, and all I could think was it was time for me to get to the pub and have a pint because I was done.
Because you'd earned it. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for the invite. I've spent my career around content, and I like to always think I've been in the market data business in one way or another, but I've always been in what I think about as the content delivery business. I've told my kids for years I'm a FedEx driver in many ways, that I don't create all the information that's in the box, but I make sure I get the box to the users to do their job. So the metadata around it, the routing of the information, that could be building a terminal or creating a feed. But you mentioned I was at Moody's for many years. I was there for around 2 decades. Before Moody's, I had some time at the Associated Press where I ran their financial products. Most people don't think about the Associated Press as a market data company. I ran their market data operation where I had feeds coming in from every exchange. In the US, they didn't have international feeds, but I was running real-time ticker plants in addition to building financial news products. And before I was going to say,
I worked for AP Dow Jones Telerate was my first job, which was Associated Press, Dow Jones.
Yes.
So there's another connection there.
Yeah. And then I was at Reuters through some acquisitions, came into Reuters for years, doing news and data there. And even before that, I worked at a bunch of fintech firms that we would now call fintech. Back then, they were just small market data companies. I've been around for a while.
You really are old, aren't you? I mean, I thought I was old, but
which is why one of the reasons I was excited when it was time to leave Moody's, because it gave me the opportunity I said I wanted to go educate myself and immerse myself in what was next. So I've spent the last year focused on non-traditional markets, so real world assets, private equity, private credit. I've been focused on getting educated and working around blockchain technologies, tokenization, and fractionalization. So the past year has been about, I'm going to say, educating myself on the future of the markets and where things are going in the future. So that's a long intro, but that's my intro.
But it sets the scene, and you very graciously, you gave me, when we said, what are we going to talk about? And typically I talk about 2 or 3 things. So we're going to talk. We've got 3 topics here. So let us pile into those.
Sure. So the first topic I sent over, David, was modern delivery and what's actually new in AI. So I look at that as a couple of different pieces that are really important to talk about when it comes to market data, what computer processing can do today. So computers are faster. It's much like if you're playing a video game, video games today are better quality and run better today than they did 5, 6, 10 years ago because the computers can do more with it. So computer processing has sped up. The techniques even for generative AI have existed, but we didn't have the power to do it. So NVIDIA and other providers have given us the chips that allow us to run those technologies. But for years, we've been doing AI. We've been doing AI to pattern match in textual documents and news stories to help us with data quality. It's machine learning has existed. Natural language processing has existed. It's just the power in the techniques and the tools are more advanced today. The
and
other
and, and
topic,
continuously I mean, the
yes,
thing that shocks me is the rate of increase of improvement or the next generations coming along. It's frightening.
yeah, it is truly frightening. And the tooling to allow engineers to take advantage of those of the capabilities are getting more and more accessible. You don't need to have I don't know. You don't need to be a statistics major who can write at the machine assembly level of the machine anymore to take advantage of these technologies. I was speaking to someone recently who was a founder, started a company, and he said he had an idea for a new company, and he was able to pretty much build his full prototype on his own, whereas previously he needed 10 people. And I asked him how he did that. He said, well, I'm using vibe coding, uh, lovable and similar techniques to build the user interface, using Claude code. So the technology is making things, the coding tools are making it easier. Technology is faster. So generative AI is here. AI is going to continue to evolve and but it's just the point that AI is new, it's not new.
But there's another dimension, and we might even creep over into your second topic. I shall try not to, but I think
Okay.
there's a hint on the second topic as well, which is our world of financial markets and the financial market data is rather peculiar and specialist. And when you talk about data, it's about understanding the data. So if you just throw, I think I was watching some video this morning about AI and the way it understands or the way tokens are constructed. But it was saying, if the cat sat on the mat, and which are tokens in that, but it said if the cat sat on the bank, how does the AI know that the word bank means the bank of a river versus as a bank? There's all these subtleties, and therefore, in order for AI to be able to correctly make sense of all of this data that we have, the needs. My good friend Tim Baker always talks about this: making data AI ready. In other words, if you just throw our raw data or the typical data at AI, it sort of, I don't know, it could make a mess of it. I mean, you alluded to
Yeah.
in your briefing note, you were starting to talk about kind of like Databricks and Snowflake in the cloud, and how actually there are data constructs, data models, data formats. I'll let you explain Parquet and ORC or ORC and things like that. But again, you know, it's great for doing the things that I love. If you want to ask ChatGPT to write a poem or research a document, but when you ask it to look at market data or reference data or alternative data, I think it needs some help, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And you've just loaded up probably, I'm going to say 10 different items. So I'm going to try to keep it, I'll try to answer that and
I
keep it
just hit you.
simple.
Yeah, it was.
No, no, which is great. So I'll try to make sure I hit each of these points. I'm also going to try to not use a lot of technical buzzwords. Uh, and so I think we have to make one of our challenges we have uh, across all industries, across the market data industries, we like to talk about our buzzwords. I had someone ask me the other day, I was talking about MCP and I mentioned the fix protocol, and we went off on a tangent on talking about the two. So I don't want to talk about the buzzwords. I'll try to keep it simple here. So you talked about words, and so it first thing that has to happen when you're ingesting content, any content, it could be numeric or words. I'm going to start with words though. When you're ingesting words and making it AI ready, is you're converting those words into numbers. So when you convert words into numbers, a cat meows, a dog barks. The distance between cat and meow is very they're very close. So in the formulas that are used to take those words, it puts them close together. Cat and bark have a greater distance between them. So if you We for years talked about natural language searching, that instead of having to use very strict and or not, I would like stories about IBM and earnings. You could just say, tell me about the latest IBM earnings. That is a natural language search. So with semantic search, it's really looking at the distance between words. So if you go in and say, tell me about this news story. Well, a news story could talk about a merger and acquisition. That's great. Does the word rumor exist in there? Who are the advisors? These are all concepts you may want to extract from the story, and AI can help you do that. But it's doing that because it's looking at the numeric transformation of words into numbers and the distance between different numbers. Rumor and closing of a deal have distance between them.
I
So
mean,
an
is this
M&A deal.
again? A little learning's a dangerous thing. I was understanding about vector databases and the vectors, which is, I think, this distance concept.
Yes, it is.
Again, I mean, so what is that in practical terms for us in our market data industry, if I can describe it that way? What do people need to do? I suppose there's two sides to this, as there always are in our industry. There are the people who are producing and delivering the data, and then there are the people receiving and ingesting and doing something with the data. How much emphasis is on the people creating the data to make their data more understandable, more accessible?
Okay,
Let's start with that, maybe.
sure. So I think as vendors have to realize the data they're delivering. In many cases, if it is a feed that's being put into a database, the vendor doing the vectorization of the content is not helpful for a lot of end users. And let me explain that point first. So converting the words into the numbers, there's many different mathematical formulas that can be used to convert the words into numbers. And the AI companies provide tools to do that. So you can have OpenAI help you convert it, or there's various open source ways to convert words into vectors. If I vectorize content and I send it to you, and somebody else vectorizes content and sends it to you, the model that we use to vectorize the content might be different. So my data set and the other data set can't be commingled and searched. It's the consumer, when they bring the data sets in, will need to do the vectorization on their side and use a consistent model of vectoring so you can make the content cross-searchable. So that's one thing.
Okay, keep going. I've got thoughts raging.
Right. Then there's also the vector database. So it's the database where you store the content. And I said I was going to try to keep things as simple as possible.
It's not that simple. So people can look some of this stuff up.
Well, I'm going to say I have a water bottle and I have a cup. Those are two different containers. How I drink from each of them is different. So having two vector databases, while they're both databases that are designed to store vectors, when you go to extract content or search the content, they may not be they're not 100% compatible. So it is important for the customer, the technology team at the customers, to make decisions about what technologies they're going to use and adopt, and assure that the content they're taking in from their vendors, they can load into their data structure as efficiently as possible.
But are we just replicating the problem we've always had? I mean, I come from a Reuters background. I was on Triarch and RMDS, and I left, but then it became TREP, and now it's RTD. But at the very heart of that Triarch, RMDS, TREP, RTD was data normalization. The fact that you, as a client, as a bank who bought a Triarch system or an RMDS system or whatever, you bought feed handlers. The feed handlers understood the language, the structure of the data, the protocol of the incoming data, and then converted it into this standard data model. I think they used to call it market feed. And therefore, all of the consuming applications on that Triarch, RMDS, RTD, whatever it is, only had to understand one data model, even if they were dealing with data from 30 or 40 or 100 different sources. And I think that's what you're alluding to, in the sense it's the downstream customer who does that translation of the model, or creates the vector database.
Right.
But isn't the
So,
problem, we've still got hundreds of different providers of data, all talking different languages, different protocols, different data constructs. Oh gosh, isn't that? I mean, I've got a headache just saying it.
so you've simplified it more than I have. Uh, so this is where the other part of the initial point I had was about uh, vendors sometimes fighting the customer's modern technical stack. So as a vendor, if I decide I'm as crazy as it sounds, file transfer protocol is still in use across the financial markets. The FTP standard was last updated in the mid 80s. Uh, to load that file coming, reference data coming in via that type of structure, you need a feed handler to load the data into the database. There's modern techniques today that could reduce the cost for the consuming firms. So as vendors are using Snowflake or Databricks or AWS's S3 capabilities, it's understanding what the customer has, and there are modern ways to deliver the data into the customer's database structure. So you can remove a lot of the technical feed handling pieces. And the reason I wanted to raise this point here is uh, the market data procurement teams oftentimes don't understand the technologies that are being used by their engineering teams. On the vendor side, the sales team doesn't always understand the new technologies that are available that the vendor has. So you have two groups of middle people who are have distance between those who are building the capabilities, those who are going to be consuming and ingesting the content, and we need to get those two groups talking to each other, because in many ways we can actually reduce the total cost of ownership for the buyers of data by making it easier for them to consume the data into their systems. Uh, so all of the classic issues of needing to write feed handlers still exist, but there are ways to reduce some of the friction for the consuming customer. And I think we went down a tangent with vector databases. That's probably not the right tangent. It's really the simple, I want to get this descriptive data loaded. How can I get it as easy as possible?
And I mean, what I think we're getting at here is it's almost the same problem that has been around for years and years, but it's now in this slightly new, different environment. The AI, generative AI, agentic, all of that is new, but the problem's old. And you know, I think what you're suggesting is that if the providers of data, let's call them data vendors, but I would include exchanges. Exchanges are
Sure.
data vendors of a type. They're selling their data. They're distributing their data. Um, and the difficulty over many, many years is getting everybody, or as many different players, to do things the same way. I mean, there's a whole different conversation about the commercial terms and the constructs of data licensing, which is a whole different conversation. But in terms of sort of data feed constructs, I mean, you talked about the fixed protocol. There was also fast, which was fixed adapted for streaming technology. I think there are a number of sort of protocols where a number of exchanges sort of, I think they use the old NASDAQ OMX technology, and therefore their formats are the same. But again, who are the entities, who are the organizations on the provider's side who should be listening to this, and what are we suggesting they do? I mean, you've talked about they should deliver data in native cloud formats.
Yeah.
Can you
So
talk about that a bit more?
sure. So I would say today most vendors do have uh, modern capabilities that will deliver in native cloud formats. And so instead of delivering JSON or XML files or uh, even older formats, they can deliver the data in a structure that can be loaded very simply into a client system. Uh, in some cases, I don't think it is a need that the vendors change their capability. And this will get into the next topic, which is the data, the metadata. What the bigger challenge is isn't necessarily the data format, it's the descriptive information around the data to make it usable by the end user.
And I think there is a natural segue into your point one into your point two. Let's go that direction. But I think, let's touch on a thing that I've heard a lot about in the last 6 months to a year, which is MCP,
Sure.
Management Context Protocol, which I think when I've looked it up, it's described as like the USB-C of the data world. All it is a sort of a socket, a standardized socket that you can plug into. And a lot of the data vendors have come out with MCP servers recently. But that doesn't solve the problem you and I have just been discussing, does it?
Not at all. And so you say the USB socket. I'm going to take it one step further. Your television with streaming channels into your TV, your Roku stick or your Apple TV. You decide you want to get Netflix and HBO or the BBC. You don't have to think about how do you connect them in. You've plugged the stick in, and the MCP server in many ways is Netflix can communicate with your TV. So now you've plugged your Netflix into your television. MCP, you've plugged in your data source into Claude or OpenAI, so your AI can now talk to that data provider. That's great. That doesn't solve the bigger issue of market data, which goes back to the historic issues of identifiers, clear descriptive data. So I don't want to call out any individual company, but I'm familiar with a vendor who had multiple data feeds before MCP, but multiple feeds. They had in those feeds, they had a field in multiple feeds that had the term identifier. Very simple. I did. But you would think that one vendor to connect their data sets together, the common key is going to be the ID. It wasn't common because in one of the products they had an ISIN.
Yeah.
And another, they had a QSIP. Well, you can convert a QSIP into an ISIN very easily because a QSIP is a subset of an ISIN. You add the country code, calculate the check digit. In another, they had a ticker symbol. So they had different common keys to connect their data sets together. And so that's probably the easiest example. Then you looked at some of their other content when they had a company name, they abbreviated the company names differently. So they had a short one product had short name, one had long name, but they all had the field that said name. So it made it very hard to bring the content in. So one engineer to say, oh, this is easy. I've loaded all these data sets. I now just connect them together. So with MCP, we need to provide the descriptive information about the data. We need to provide rich metadata that not just is saying, here's what the field, but describe the field so that the AI knows what it's using. We need to provide information about when the data was updated. And, we talked news earlier. When you get the, Business Week is published, there is a date on the front of Business Week. But the electronic feed of Business Week, that story may have been written and published on a feed days earlier. So what is the date timestamp on that news story? The same thing exists with just market data. Is the timestamp when the database was updated? Is the timestamp the as of when that data was actually published? So we need that descriptive data so the AI knows what data set to pull when. They may have data from multiple vendors.
Wasn't that, again, I'm wondering if all these problems are just the old problems resurfacing. I mean, I'm thinking back to the whole concept of reference data and the whole concept of security master files and the whole concept of a golden source and data cleansing and all this because of all these databases and data sets that were out of sync and what have you, and the amount of work that went into them. This is 10, 15, 20 years ago. I remember this was all being talked about. Are we just replicating the same problems? Have we not learned? I don't know.
I think the simple answer is, yeah, we haven't learned. We're replicating the same issues we had years ago. And this is, in some cases, we're making them worse because the AI, we're saying, AI, you have access to the MCP from all these data providers. I'm going to ask you a question. Go get me the answer. Well, it's not that the AI is hallucinating. It's giving you an answer. A vendor, this is the data from a vendor, but the AI doesn't necessarily
Yeah,
know
because
that it was
the cat has sat on Morgan Stanley because it said the cat sat on the bank.
right.
I don't know if that's
Yes. No, but yes, you are right. And so it does put a lot of the demand on the programmers who are setting up the AI tools within the financial institution, that they have to build the rules in there that are looking at the data sets and saying, is the information there? If there's not information on the date, the source, I have any uncertainty, they're going to have to return an answer of, I'm not sure. I can't give you an answer because the information isn't clear today. So it is imperative on the market data vendors to not just set up an MCP server, but to set it up an MCP server and provide all of the documentation, all of the rich information to allow the end users to consume the information intelligently.
and
It's the same. It is the same issues,
do
just
they have?
a new delivery.
But do these data vendors, and it could be the likes of LSEG Data Analytics, Bloomberg, S&P, or it could be Deutsche Börse and Toronto Exchange. Exchanges and data vendors are all in this same situation. But is somebody asking them to all do this in a standardized way, or are we just asking them to be descriptive? In other words, if we've got 100 data sources, as long as those 100 data sources provide clear descriptions, but it could be 100 different descriptions, is that good enough? Or do we want them all to somehow conform? I hate myself for saying this, standardize, because I know there's always this, wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody standardizes? And it never seems to happen.
Well, I'm not the one to say that we should standardize or not here. So I'm going to be careful on that.
Yeah.
But I will say what you actually end up having is firms who run their security master, and they'll have whatever vendor they decide is going to power their security master and be their main source. That vendor is going to still be their main source of data going forward, unless there's some level of conforming across data sets. So it is that this will help keep the big vendors entrenched and make it harder for smaller firms to enter the marketplace or displace larger vendors if there isn't some level of conformance.
And I mean, was it thus? It's almost there is a default or a de facto standard created by whichever is the biggest and ugliest provider. That's the sort of standard, rather than a de jure, some like fix, I presume, is a de jure. Some standards body has created something. But again, I agree with you're shying away from being the one to call for standards. I think the reason being is everybody will just sigh, and we've been so bad as an industry at being able to make standards work. Is it because standards are a bad idea? I don't know. Again, I feel like I'm going down the rabbit hole on this one.
Well, I am going to say there are some areas that standards have been great, and in sell side research, when RxML, the research industry XML, was developed, and this is decades ago. Prior to that, if every sell side firm had They had moved from just having paper, the printouts that were going to offices, to having an electronic version of their document. So they had a PDF, but there was not a standard way to deliver that PDF to the buy side. So that consortium came together and said, let's create a standard wrapper that we wrap around the sell side research to make it easy that we can deliver it into the buy side. And they put some basic parameters around it. Who is the source? When was it updated? And some other descriptive data. And what happened almost overnight was, uh, you know, all of the vendors could write a single feed handler, and they could bring in, and all the consumers could write a single feed handler to bring in that sell side research very easily. They didn't need to write a different handler for each provider, for each sell side firm. So that's where a standard does work. There was no, uh, for everyone, it was a win-win.
And
And
I think you were just about to say, or at least I was thinking, it's because there was no single sell side firm providing research that dominated and could
yeah,
therefore say, do it my way. They were
yeah,
all, 15, 20, 30, whatever, sort of reasonably equal. And it made sense to standardize. Whereas I think in some parts of, and again, I've said this on many podcasts. When I use the phrase market data, I mean all the data that the market uses. I know other people use the phrase market data to mean sort of real-time pricing, but I'm talking about the entirety of the data ecosystem that services the capital markets. And the issue, I was going to say the problem, it's not a problem. It's an issue that needs to be dealt with, is that there are some very large players, and therefore that de facto standards tend to sort of converge on them. I mean, we sort of went into the second topic, data quality and metadata. I think if I'm reading your note that you graciously sent me, I mean, it was this idea that with AI, data quality, and I think the metadata topic we've been talking about is part of that discussion, not the only part, but part of it. Um, has always been, for a long time, an issue. If you're taking data feeds, you could see that because you're seeing the feeds coming in and you're tracking and analyzing them. Whereas human consumption, the human eye maybe didn't catch problems with data quality. But now you've got AI, the blips in data quality, the jitter, the outliers, the errors or whatever are more visible. Is that the point you were making, Mike?
it I don't think it was the point
Sort
I
of.
was making, but I'm going to say that is a point that it is. It is.
You were
I was alluding to it.
observing. You were
Yes.
observing.
Yeah. So it is 100% that is the case. Is those outliers are easier to see, and I think every day the exchanges, while as they all do a great job, there are blips at different times throughout the day with a if you look at every tick by tick data, you're going to find some ticks that are just out of whack. They're 30% off of the prior tick and the next tick. And the vendors will correct that very quickly. The exchanges will correct that. Vendors also have tools to correct that. In AI, which hasn't been trained to look at that as an outlier, when you see a 20% price change or you see a high price that is lower than low price, uh, doesn't know how to react and act on that. The human brain is going to know how to react on that. We have to teach the AI to react to those blips. And they'll learn over time, but the first time the reaction might make a bad trade unintentionally.
And I mean, is this simply an observation, or is there what do we learn? What do we infer from this? And what can, when I say we, not you and I, the industry, what can the industry do? Because surely all those data vendors, they don't want outliers and blips and
Yeah.
errors. They're not doing it deliberately. I mean, a little adjunct I remember is somebody was saying most data vendors, I don't know if all of them, basically don't provide any quality guarantee. They don't provide any sort of service agreement saying we promise the data will always be accurate. I don't quite know what the legalistic phraseology is, but it's almost like on a best efforts, reasonable endeavors basis. We'll get you the best data we possibly can, but we can't guarantee it.
I think the lesson I would say, yeah, I would share is data quality matters. We all have to build in tools. Every step of the way, we all should be building in checks into the data to identify what could be anomalies. I will say with generative AI, It can learn. Generative AI can be trained over time to find if there's an anomaly. A human in the loop identifies it. The AI can then be trained, I'm going to put that into quotes, trained to look for similar anomalies to identify that's an anomaly to not apply it again in the future. What we need to do as exchanges, data providers, is provide as much information as possible to allow the end consumer to know the descriptions about our data. This goes back to the metadata, the aboutness of the data, when it was updated, who, uh, um, when it might expire. Anything we can about that. It's like you go into your refrigerator and it says use by date on your carton of milk. Data also has expiration dates. We need to provide as much information as possible, and that's what when I talk about the metadata, I think is really important that we do.
Mike, I just use the smell test. I just sniff at the data. And no, I hear you. And I mean, again, is your observation that actually the AI could get caught out by blips in data quality, but over time, it will be a tool that will enable us to spot issues with data quality, and by being able to spot them, potentially fix them. Because again, I mean, one of the great things about AI is this pattern recognition. It can spot anomalies, and more than a human being can. I mean, is that part of this story, or I gone off on another
No,
tangent?
I think you're spot on that. Is you know, eh, but much like a self-driving car, if the map is incorrect because a road is closed, you just need guardrails, and that's what I think. You need have the human in the loop to help you continue to update and train uh, the AI to make better decisions. The AI cannot spot anomalies, but the AI can also miss anomalies when it hasn't been trained to look for the anomaly.
It needs to be taught, what are anomalies and what aren't anomalies. Look, I'm conscious of time, but number three, your total cost of ownership and
Yeah.
ending the audit love-ins, I think you wrote.
Yeah.
Was that what you
Well,
wrote?
yeah, it was close enough. Uh,
It was
well,
audit wars, you said. You audit
yes.
wars, yeah.
Well, I can say I have been the recipient of audits. I have never, for all my friends out there, I have never actually instituted an audit that I've gone and done an audit on a consumer firm. But when I was a consumer, I was the beneficiary of having auditors come in.
But
Uh,
the audit is all to do with the owners of the data just wanting to check that the data that they've sold and that's being delivered is being paid for as it should be and
yeah,
used as has been licensed, etc., etc. I mean, what tee up this topic? I mean, there's
yeah.
lots to talk
So,
about on
so
audits,
I,
but you had
I,
a particular thought in mind.
I want to speak more about the total cost of ownership, but on audit, um, it comes down to trust. We need to trust each other. And I mean, I had an experience where um, a customer was canceling a product. And my account manager was like, I can't believe they're canceling it. I said, yeah, well, we tried and they told us they're canceling. So they're canceling. So let's turn it off. And we told them when we were going to turn off the feed. We actually left it on a few extra days. We turned it off. Within 48 hours, we had a handful of phone calls. Where's my data? And, we called up our main contact and they're like, well, who are the people who are calling you? Gave them the names. Within days, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, we need this turned back on. There were multiple downstream groups using the data that we didn't know were using the data.
And it sounds to me like the internal department, the market data department, also didn't know. I mean,
They didn't.
I think being charitable, it wasn't them
Yeah,
hiding from you. They genuinely didn't realize their own
right.
internal people were using it.
Yeah, and so it was not we had a great relationship, and we kept a very good relationship, and we didn't say, "Oh, you were purposely overusing the data," but it really showed that we all need to be talking. And with this one customer, they were like, this is unfortunate, but now you've taught us that we have to actually be more disciplined about talking to our end users and making sure that they understand what usage rights we have, what we have licensed to use, and they actually put a program in place to educate their internal teams. Now, that is a situation that would an audit have actually exposed that overuse? I don't think so. Because if there was an audit, we would have gone in, talked to the market data team. The market data team said, here is the group that's using the data. They would have shown us what was being used, and we would have walked away and said, okay, that's the group that's licensed. So it was some of the internal controls at that firm needed hardening. I don't think a traditional audit would have actually caught and exposed that unintended overuse.
But I think peeling back the layers, the point, and as you said, it's trust. But the reason, I don't know, the reason trust is broken down to some degree is, I remember earlier in FISD years, we were talking about the different types of data pirates, people who were stealing data. And I think there were three groups. There was, see if I can remember this, the one group were the people who basically said, well, I'm going to steal this data. I don't think XYZ firm needs the money. Sod them. I'm just going to use it and not pay for it. Very malicious, very, then there's a middle ground, which are people who are saying, well, look, it's not right. They shouldn't be allowed to charge us for that. It's morally repugnant. It's sort of against all the basic rules of business. They shouldn't be allowed to charge for that. And therefore, I just as a matter of principle, I don't think I'll pay for it. And then the third group, which is by far the biggest, which is, I think, it's just the people who didn't realize they were supposed to pay for it or didn't realize they were using it, just ignorance. And I think, what is the famous saying? Ignorance of the law is no defense.
Right.
And it definitely isn't in market data. And then that third category, which is really the category we're talking about, the people who just don't realize they're not paying for it or licensing it appropriately, whatever. But isn't that just down to systems, human systems, computer systems? It's just our industry. And I don't mean this personally to the customers, because I know they wrestle with this. They just struggle with all the systems to track all their usage and to control all their usage and what have you. And this goes on. And going back to our first point, does the whole world of AI and what's going on in that, is that just going to accelerate and exacerbate a problem we've been living with for years, decades?
It could, but I do think this is where a smart contract comes into place, that we need to transfer our actual written contracts into machine readable form and provide that. That's part of the metadata that we need to be delivering, that the computers can then read the contract, understand, is that group, is that team licensed to use the information? If yes, use the information. If no, don't use the information.
And you say smart contracts. Is it more smart data? What I mean by that is data that has the contractual terms within it. It describes, I'm a bit of London Stock Exchange level 1 data. And by the way, here are all the rules about me. Is that what you're talking about?
That is what I'm talking about, but I think you need to go the step further, is for each customer, who is the contracted group? What is the contracted use case? So if the front office has licensed to access the data, traveling along with the data, if the machine can read an agreement that says, I'm in the front office and it's licensed for global use front office, go use it. Whereas the back office might not be licensed to use that same data set. The AI may find it on the company's systems, and can read and say, "Oh, this user cannot see it because their job function is X, Y, and Z. Don't show them this data set."
And I mean, is this a kissing cousin, or is it the same as digital rights management? In the FISD world, this has been something, I think since 2019 we were talking about this, and it's a sort of metadata, but it's computer readable contracts, but it's the rights and obligations and understanding what they are, and then being able to have systems in place that that can read and understand those rules and apply those rules without a human being have to. In other words, your back
Yeah.
office, front office, it wouldn't need to be the back office phoning up the market data person saying, does the contract allow me in the back office to have access
Yeah.
to the data? And the market data person has to read the contract and say, oh, no, Joe, you're not allowed it because it says only front office. It would just be, as you described, the data flowing to the back office would get blocked because the systems would read that it wasn't allowed to be used by the back office, and therefore they being the systems, wouldn't allow it to be accessible. Is that the nirvana we're aiming for?
That is. So it is, it is digital rights management. You reminded me of two different conversations at FISD over the years I was involved in. I was in a DRM conversation, wow, probably 15 years ago. And I remember sitting in the room and everyone was like, I asked the question and I think hands went up on something about how many of you are believe that it was something about data piracy. I mean, how many of you pirate data? And no hands went up. And then I asked this follow-up question. I said, on your phone, how many of you have one song that you didn't pay for? And this is merely before Spotify really took off.
Yeah.
And I think more than half the room, their hands went up. I'm like, you're pirating data there unintentionally, but you're doing it. And I think that a lot of this
or even
is unintended.
unconsciously, maybe
Unconscious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone sent me an MP3. It's on my phone.
Yeah. Oh. I know. It's intellectual property rights. And again, I mean, there's another conversation to be had here, as AI is so clever and is so capable, but is it even harder to track what AI has done with the data? Because again, I think for this to work, you've got to have digital mechanisms in place, systems in place that can track and see and control whether. I worked in the Reuters world, DAX, good old DAX, entitlements and all that sort of works. But again, it only works to a point. The system can only do so much. And again, all these systems only work if they're set up correctly. Again, it's a tool. And if you don't, there's an analogy, isn't there? A set of books, you go in to audit a company and they have a set of books that they lock away in a safe and they give you a different set of books. It's a joke. It's the idea a company has two sets of books, the dodgy ones and the ones they show the accountants, and the tax man. I'm not quite saying the financial markets are doing that. But the good set of books, the good DAX, the good EMR, is it all tracking everything that it should be tracking? I don't know. Mike, help me. I'm going down another rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm not sure I don't know if I have the answer here, but I just think it comes back to trust, open conversations, talking to all of the parties, and have open communication. Yes, AI can hallucinate. AI, when you're accessing multiple MCP servers, you don't know what the source of the data is. So make sure when the response comes back, you tag what source it came from. You might have cases of deriving data where you're calculating two data sets together to create a new data set. You just need to be aware of all of these issues and don't just think about the conversation with your data provider as it's a contractual arrangement and we're fighting to get the lowest price. Think about how do we get everyone at the table to have a conversation to make sure we're using the information as efficiently as possible. We know what we're using because at the end of the day, people buy data because they want to make money. They want to make decisions off of that data.
And I'll finish this topic because I want to hit you with your last two thoughts. But just finishing off on this one, I always remember, I won't say his name, but it was somebody who was global head of market data at a very big bulge bracket firm. And we were talking about digital rights management. And it was trying to explain why it was a good thing for the data providers to get on board with the idea. And I think the point this person made was, look, if you make it easier for us to track all of this, we'll buy more data. When it's difficult and we're trying to be awfully careful with it, we probably buy less. if we didn't need to be quite so careful, we'd end up buying more.
Yeah.
That
I agree with that. So I'll use an analogy. I grew up working in a hardware store, and customer comes in to buy a can of paint. Most hardware stores you go into, okay, you want paint, what color? Oh, you want it shaken? I'll put it on the shaker. Here's the can of paint. I was taught very early on, think about what the customer is doing and put yourself in their shoes and try to help them do their job. So I would say, do you need a paintbrush? Do you have a ladder? Do you need sandpaper? Hey, it's supposed to rain today, later today. That paint needs 12 hours of drying time. It's going to rain in 6 hours, so you might want to put it off putting it on. Put
and stretching
yourself
that,
in that
yeah.
shoe.
And
In their shoes.
stretching that, you might say, don't buy 10 liters. You only need 5, because most people only need 5, which might seem like you're doing yourself a disservice. But if you did that and they discovered they really only did need 5, then they'll love you and they'll come
Yes.
back and buy more paint, and they'll tell all their friends to go and buy the paint from Mike.
Yeah.
Because he told me to buy.
So that is actually one of the total cost of ownership stories I want to tell. So years ago, I had a customer who was upset about their annual contract was coming up and their price was going up, and it was a couple of percentage points. And the sales team said, Mike, we need you at the customer. So I went to the account, and they're telling me laying out the whole reason why they can't pay more. And I actually said, can I change the conversation for a minute? Why do you consume this feed from me 11 times? And they go, what do you mean 11 times? I go, I've checked the server. You have 11 different processes that pull this file that updates once a day, and they pull it at different times throughout the day. Why do you have 11 processes doing it? Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I showed them the stats. And then they came back to me a few days later and said, you're right. What should we be doing? Said, take it in once, don't have 11 teams processing it, load the data once, and that way your front, middle, and back office will have the data updated at the exact same time. There won't be mismatches behind the scenes. And they re-architected their entire process. Took them 18 months, but they saved millions and millions of dollars that they
But
wouldn't have
you
known
lost
about.
millions and millions of dollars.
No,
Your
I
salespeople
didn't.
must have hated you.
No, because they weren't paying for that feed 11 times. It was the same fee for that one feed. They just had 11 different jobs accessing the server to pull the data down.
Oh, right. So they had you streamlined their process, so that helped them. That
helped
saved them money. They didn't pay less money to you necessarily,
right?
But
so
they felt
better about the relationship with me.
And it's that consultative sales. And again, going back to your trust point, I've sat down because I've worked with FISD over many years, and we're trying to bring everybody together. And I would say trust has broken down. I had at least one person on this very podcast who had a lovely conversation. And then I said to her, you don't really think all the exchanges are evil, do you? Expecting her to say, no, of course not. I know it's all business, all fair in love and war. And she paused and smiled and said, well, yes, I sort of do. And, there's a lot of emotion there. There's a lot, I mean, gosh, Mike, working for Moody's, I love Moody's, but rating agencies and index, there's certain parts of the industry get a bit of a tough old, the customers have a few things to say, rightly or wrongly.
I don't work at Moody's. I don't represent Moody's anymore, but I will say I took it very, I always try to build that bridge as best as I can. And
I remember you did. I remember you were, and you had a tough old, because there was a lot of emotion starting out. And again, that trust point, we're not going to solve it on this podcast.
But I will share, there was one association in Germany who I had a meeting with, and they said, our members are upset with you. And I sat there and listened and came back with responses. And we ended up building enough of trust that when I was writing responses when they were writing regulatory responses to the regulators, they were calling me up oftentimes and saying, here is our response before we send it over. Do you want to talk about it? Are we getting some things right or wrong? And not that we always agreed at the end, but at least we built the relationship to have the conversation. And I think that was really important. Uh,
Well,
Tristan DeHaan and I
yeah, yeah, yeah.
butted heads at many conferences, but I would consider Tristan one of my best friends in the industry. And I would regularly, when he was on the consumer side, I'd regularly make sure I would make a trip to Rotterdam and we'd go have lunch together and talk through our differences.
And I always remember somebody else at a conference saying something along the lines of, all these exchanges and rating, oh, it's as if they're trying to make money out of us. And I sort of, what? Yes. You as the customer have to realize that on the other side of the fence is a profit-seeking entity, and they're going to try and do everything they can to maximize their profits. But if you can have an intelligent conversation, if you've got a Mike Salk on the other side of the conversation, you can probably have an intelligent conversation. Mike, we need to bring this to a close.
Yes.
I mean, parting thought, something you wish you'd said on this podcast, but I rabbited on and didn't let you. So your final words, final thoughts.
My final thought is something I think has always been important to me is, and we have talked about this, so I'm going to just reiterate it again. Dialogue helps. When you don't talk to the party at the other side of the table, you don't understand their perspective. And while you may not always agree, we are, as vendors are there trying to make money. Consumer firms are trying to make money. We're all trying to make money. And let's have the dialogue and figure out where items are breaking down. And we may not always agree, but if you don't have the dialogue, you don't have a chance to get to any agreement. So that's my parting thought.
And I don't know who said it. Is it more talk, less war? I don't know if it was Churchill. Somebody said that, or Mark Twain, or whoever, one of those people. But that is that is an eminently good thing to say. And I think it feeds into our FISD. You and I know each other through FISD. I mean, this podcast is not an FISD podcast, right, but that holds close to me. So look, Mike,
can I give you one? Can I give you one final thought?
You can.
At a WIFIT, World Financial Information Conference, I sat on a panel once and I made this comment and I said, I love my customers. And people laughed. I said, and the reason I said that is without customers, I don't have a business.
That is so true. It's so true. It's two sides. We've all and again, I applaud the whole FISD concept, getting people together to talk through the issues. There's always going to be tension, but it's natural business tension, and there are ways of addressing that. So, Mike, I want to say thank you. I want to apologize to you slightly, and maybe to the audience. A couple of technical issues here, which I think, especially if you're listening to it, it'll all go smoothly. If you're watching it, I'd be intrigued to see whether I'm going to freeze or Mike's going to freeze. But you know what we look like. It's what we say, not what we look like, that matters. So, Michael, thank you so much. And stay on the line for the upload.
Thank you for having me, David.